This 4-year-old vagrant girl sees a millionaire slaved by a rancher, but she appears behind him and does something that shocks everyone. Comment, telling me what city you're watching from. I really want to know where you are. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The scorching midday sun beat down on the dusty streets of Harmony Creek as Lily plunged her small hands deep into the trash can behind Mr. Joe's bakery. At 4 years old, she already knew every corner of the town where she might find scraps of bread or fruit that could still serve to quell the hunger that had gnawed at her stomach for 2 days. Her brown hair was tangled and dirty, her faded pink dress hung loosely on her thin frame, but her large, dark eyes still shone with the determination of a child who had learned to survive alone too early. The girl held up a piece of moldy bread, examined it carefully, and decided it was still good enough to eat when she heard the sound of an engine sputtering on the dirt road that led to the ranches on the outskirts of town. Curious as any child, Lily tucked the bread into her dress pocket and ran toward the sound, her worn sandals kicking up small clouds of red dust. And from the top of a small hill covered with peach orchards, she spotted a sleek black sedan stopped in the middle of the road. Steam was billowing from the hood, and a tall man in a dark suit and tie was pacing nervously around the vehicle, talking on his cell phone. Even from a distance, Lily could tell he wasn't from around here. His fine clothes, the way he walked, everything about him screamed big city, money, a world entirely different from hers. David Harrison, 42, hung up the phone in frustration, his Lexus having overheated right in the middle of nowhere, and the cell service was too weak to call a tow truck. So he looked around, seeing only peach orchards stretching as far as the eye could see, eventually spotting a large white house in the distance with an iron gate. Realizing he had no choice but to ask for help, Lily followed him from afar, hiding behind the rows of peach trees, fascinated by the strange man who walked as if he owned the world, and as he rang the ranch's doorbell, she crept closer, ducking behind a bush near the gate, seeing the front door open to reveal a burly man with grey hair and a thick moustache, Frank Wallace, 58, who studied the visitor with small, calculating eyes before offering a smile that didn't reach them. "Good afternoon," David said, trying to maintain his composure. "My car broke down on the road. Could you lend me a phone or help me out somehow?" Frank took a few seconds to respond, as if evaluating something important, before finally saying, Sure. Come in, please." "I'm Frank Wallace, the owner of this property." Lily watched the two men shake hands, but something in the air felt heavy, tense, and the rancher looked at David as if he knew him from somewhere. There was something unsettling about his smile. "David Harrison." The man in the suit introduced himself, extending his hand. Frank's smile widened strangely. "Harrison, that's an interesting name." "Very interesting indeed." They went inside the house, and Lily remained hidden, sensing that something important was happening, even without understanding exactly what. Silence weighed for a few minutes until raised voices began to leak from the house. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was one of argument, of conflict. Half an hour later, Frank came out of the house, pulling David by the arm. The man in the suit no longer had the same confident posture as before, looking smaller, defeated. Frank shoved him toward an area on the property's grounds where other men were working under the blazing sun, harvesting the crop. "You'll work here until I decide what to do with you," Frank yelled, throwing a shovel at David's feet. "And don't even think about running away. This area is too isolated, and I have influence with the right people." Lily's eyes widened, unable to believe what she was seeing. The elegant man in the expensive car was being forced to work like a common laborer. But there was something more than just a request for help that went wrong. The way Frank looked at David, the cruel satisfaction in his eyes, suggested this was no accident. David picked up the shovel with trembling hands, looked at the relentless sun overhead, and at the other workers who watched him with a mix of pity and fear, none of them daring to help him or question Frank's orders. Little Lily remained hidden, witnessing the strange and frightening scene. Without knowing why, she felt an inexplicable connection to the man suffering under the sun, perhaps because she also knew what it was like to be at the mercy of more powerful people, or maybe it was something deeper she couldn't yet comprehend. As the sun began to set, painting the sky orange and red, Lily finally emerged from her hiding place and ran back to the abandoned shed where she had been sleeping since her grandmother, Clara Jones, passed away 3 months ago. But the image of that man being humiliated wouldn't leave her mind, nor would the strange certainty that their lives were connected in a way she didn't yet understand. That night, as she curled up in an old, ragged blanket on the cold shed floor, Lily made a decision that would change everything. She would return to the ranch the next day to find out what was really happening with that mysterious man. Dawn brought with it the song of the blue jays and the sweet aroma of the ripe peaches spreading through the air, and Lily woke up with her stomach rumbling and her mind still occupied with the images from the day before. She got up from the shed floor, shook the dust off her dress, and decided she needed to better understand what was happening at Frank's ranch. As she walked through the still empty streets of Harmony Creek, she didn't notice she was being watched. Sarah Miller, 34, had arrived early for work at the Child Protective Services, CPS, office and spotted the girl alone from her window. With brown hair pulled back in a simple bun and discreet clothing, Sarah had watchful eyes that never missed a vulnerable child. "That girl is out on the streets alone again," she murmured to herself, making a note in her agenda. She had noticed Lily several times before, always dirty, always looking for food, always without responsible adult supervision. Lily arrived at the ranch's perimeter when the sun was already high, hiding in the same spot as the day before, observing the activity. Several men were working in the peach orchards, but she quickly located David. He was now wearing simple, dirty clothes, very different from yesterday's elegant suit. His hands, which had seemed soft and well-kept, were now red and blistered from the heavy labor. Frank circulated among the workers like a general inspecting troops, shouting orders and making threats. And when he approached David, Lily paid extra attention. "Sleep well in the bunkhouse with the others, Mr. Executive?" Frank scoffed, pronouncing the last word with sarcasm. "I hope you're getting used to your new life." David looked up from his work, and Lily could see something strange in his expression. There was anger, yes, but also a cold determination that didn't match the victim position he appeared to occupy. "You can't keep me here forever," David said, his voice low but firm. "Yes, I can," Frank retorted, moving closer, "especially when I know exactly who you are and what you came here for." "Did you think I wouldn't find out, Harrison?" Lily frowned, confused. What did he mean? What did he come here for? Hadn't his car simply broken down? "I don't know what you're talking about," David replied, but his voice trembled slightly. Frank laughed loudly, an unpleasant sound that startled some birds into flight. 15 years of searching, right? 15 years following false leads, bribing people, investigating. But you never imagined the answer was right here, under your nose. Lily's heart raced without understanding why. There was something in that conversation that stirred her in a strange way, as if those words were important to her own life. David dropped the shovel, his hands visibly shaking now. "Where is she?" "Who?" Frank asked, pretending not to understand, clearly enjoying the other man's desperation. "You know very well who I'm talking about." "Ah, you mean your dear Victoria?" Frank said, savoring every word. "The woman you lost so long ago?" Lily felt a strange shiver run down her spine. That name, Victoria. Why did it sound familiar? Why did it make her chest tighten in a way she couldn't explain? "If you did anything to her," David began, taking a threatening step toward Frank. "Easy, easy," the rancher chuckled. "You're not in a position to make threats. In fact, you'll work for me for as long as I want. You'll obey me in everything, or you'll never see even a shadow of her." "Is she alive?" David's voice came out as a desperate whisper. Frank didn't answer, just smiled cruelly and walked away, leaving David standing there, clearly distraught. The girl could see tears streaming down the man's dirty face, and something inside her broke. Lily remained hidden until late afternoon, watching David work under the scorching sun. He seemed to be in another world, moving mechanically, lost in thoughts she couldn't reach. When the workers were finally released, she followed him from a distance to a simple bunkhouse where they apparently slept, and it was then that she saw something that made her gasp in surprise. When David took off his shirt to wash himself in a basin of water, she spotted a dark mark on his right arm, near his shoulder. It was a peculiar scar, in the shape of a crescent moon, exactly like the one she had in the same place on her body. Lily's heart pounded. How was it possible? How could two people have such specific and identical marks? She looked at her own arm, touching the scar that had always been there, which her grandmother Clara Jones said was a special birthmark. That night, back in the shed, Lily couldn't sleep. The image of David's scar was etched in her mind, as were the strange words about someone named Victoria. There was a connection there, she knew, but she was too small to understand what it meant. Meanwhile, across town, Sarah Miller wasn't sleeping either. She had spent the afternoon making calls and checking records, trying to find out more about the girl she saw on the streets. What she found deeply worried her. According to the few records she could locate, Lily lived with a grandmother named Clara Jones, but there was no death certificate for the woman, nor a transfer of custody for the child. It was as if the girl had simply vanished from the system, invisible to the authorities. "I need to find this child tomorrow," Sarah decided, closing the folder with the few documents she had managed to gather. Something was very wrong, and her experience as a social worker told her that the longer it took, the worse the girl's situation would be. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the shed entrance and found Lily, clean now and wearing borrowed clothes, but still looking scared and lost. Sarah explained that Lily would temporarily stay in a shelter while they tried to locate family members or find a foster family. "I don't have any family left," Lily said sadly. "I only had Grandma Clara." "Sometimes relatives appear that we didn't even know existed," Sarah consoled, but as she spoke, she couldn't get the photo of the woman named Victoria out of her head. There was something familiar about that face, as if she had seen that person before. It was then that she remembered. A few weeks ago, she had attended to a family reporting the disappearance of a daughter many years ago. The woman's name was Victoria Harrison. Sarah felt like she was hit by an electric shock. Harrison. Lily was named Lily Jones, but if her mother was Victoria Harrison, that meant that... "Lily," she said carefully, "do you know your mother's full name?" "Victoria," the girl replied. "Grandma always just said Victoria. And her last name, her family name..." Lily shook her head. "I don't know. Grandma never said." Sarah picked up her phone with trembling hands and searched the system files, quickly finding the report she was looking for. David Harrison had reported the disappearance of his wife, Victoria Harrison, 15 years ago. At the time, she was 4 months pregnant. The world seemed to spin around Sarah. If her suspicions were correct, Lily wasn't just any abandoned child. She could be the daughter of David Harrison, the successful executive who had reported the disappearance of his pregnant wife 15 years ago. But where was David now? And how had a child who should have been born into a wealthy family ended up on the streets of Harmony Creek, living in miserable conditions? Sarah spent the night awake, searching files and making discreet calls to colleagues in other towns. What she discovered made her even more intrigued and worried. David Harrison really was a successful executive from Richmond, Virginia, owner of a construction company. 15 years ago, he had reported the disappearance of his pregnant wife, but the case was never solved. Even stranger, in recent months, several people reported seeing him in rural towns in Georgia, always asking questions about a woman named Victoria. The next morning, Sarah took Lily to the municipal shelter, a simple but clean place run by Catholic nuns. Lily clung to the social worker at the farewell, her eyes full of tears. "You'll come back to see me?" Lily asked with a choked voice. "Of course, sweetheart. Every day if you want," Sarah promised, her heart breaking at the fear in the child's face. Sister Margaret, the shelter's director, a 60-year-old woman with kind eyes, received Lily warmly. "Don't worry, she'll be fine here with us," she told Sarah. "We have experience with traumatized children." Leaving Lily in the care of the nuns, Sarah returned to her office determined to solve the mystery. She picked up the phone and called the Richmond Police Department, asking to speak to the detective in charge of the Harrison case. The case was archived 10 years ago, Detective Thompson informed her. "We didn't have enough leads, but David Harrison never gave up. He hired private detectives, offered rewards, traveled all over the country looking for her. And recently, is he still looking? More than ever. About 6 months ago, he showed up here saying he had discovered an important lead, something about the Harmony Creek area. That was the last time I spoke to him." Sarah felt a chill down her spine. "When exactly was that?" "Let me see. It was in March. Why? Did something happen?" "I'm still investigating," Sarah replied, hanging up quickly. "March. Exactly when Clara had died, according to the neighbors. The pieces began to fit together in a way that scared her. At Frank's ranch, David was taking advantage of his proximity to the main house to observe everything carefully. That's when he noticed something strange. One of the upstairs windows was always closed with heavy curtains that never moved. All the other windows in the house were open during the day because of the heat, but that one remained sealed. During lunch, he managed to strike up a conversation with Mike, one of the oldest workers on the ranch. "Been working here long?" David asked casually. "About 15 years, Mike replied, looking nervously around to make sure Frank wasn't nearby. "Must have seen a lot in that time." Mike became even more nervous. "Look, mister, it's best not to ask too many questions around here. The boss doesn't like it. I'm just trying to understand how things work," David insisted. "That window upstairs, for example. Why is it always closed?" Mike's face paled visibly. "You don't want to know about that, mister, believe me." Before David could ask more questions, Frank appeared, yelling for everyone to get back to work. But Mike's behavior had confirmed his suspicions. There was something important in that upstairs room. Sarah decided to take a riskier approach that afternoon. She drove to Harmony Creek and began asking discreet questions about Clara Jones's family. What she found in the City Hall archives worried her even more. Clara had bought her small house 15 years ago, paying a considerable sum in cash for a simple elderly woman. The money had come from an anonymous donation, according to the documents. Around the same time, she had registered Lily as her granddaughter, claiming the child's mother had died in childbirth. But there was no death certificate for any Victoria in the area. There was no hospital birth record for Lily. It was as if the child had simply appeared out of nowhere. "Very strange indeed," the City Hall official murmured when Sarah questioned the irregularities. But Clara was a respected person here. No one questioned it much at the time. Sarah left the City Hall with more questions than answers. She decided to visit some of Clara's neighbors to try to better understand the situation. Mrs. Peterson, a 70-year-old woman who lived next door to Clara's house, received Sarah with tea and homemade cookies. "Clara was a mysterious woman," she said, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "Showed up here out of nowhere 15 years ago, with a baby in her arms, saying it was her granddaughter. And you believed her? Look, dear, the child called her Grandma since she learned to talk, and Clara took care of her with so much love. But there was something strange, yes. Strange how? She had visitors. A man who came here sometimes, always at night, always in a nice truck. They talked softly on the porch, and I noticed she got nervous when he showed up." Sarah's heart raced. "This man, what was he like?" "Older, grey hair, bossy manner, drove an expensive pickup truck. The last time he came here was a few days before Clara, well, before she passed away. Passed away? Mrs. Peterson hesitated, as if deciding how much to tell. Look, dear, everyone knows Clara didn't die of natural causes. She was healthy, working in the yard in the morning, and by afternoon she was, well, you understand. Sarah felt a chill. Are you suggesting that— I'm not suggesting anything, Mrs. Peterson said quickly. I'm just saying it was very sudden. And after she was gone, that man came back here looking for something in the house, messed up everything, turned everything upside down. And the girl? The poor thing hid. She didn't appear for days. When I finally saw her, she was thin, dirty, clearly fending for herself. Sarah left Mrs. Peterson's house with a knot in her stomach. The pieces of the puzzle were fitting together, forming a terrible picture. Clara had died soon after David began looking for Victoria in the area. The man who visited Clara matched Frank Wallace's description, and Lily had been left to fend for herself because someone wanted her to disappear too. Returning to her car, Sarah picked up the phone and called Detective Thompson in Richmond again. I need to know exactly where David Harrison is right now, she said. It's an emergency. Ma'am, I can't give out that kind of information. A 4-year-old child may be in danger, a child who might be his daughter. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. The last information we have is that he was investigating a ranch near Harmony Creek, a property owned by a Frank Wallace. Sarah almost dropped the phone. Frank Wallace, the same name that appeared in the suspicious documents for Clara's house purchase. Detective, she said urgently, I think David Harrison is in danger, and I think I know where to find him. Sarah spent the entire night planning her next move. She couldn't just show up at Frank's ranch without a plan, especially if her suspicions about the danger David was in were correct. She decided she needed official help, but she also knew that moving the bureaucratic machine would take time they might not have. The next morning, she visited Lily at the shelter. The girl was cleaner and fed, but her big eyes still carried a deep sadness. When she saw Sarah, she ran to hug her. Aunt Sarah, you came back. I promised I would, didn't I? Sarah said, kneeling down to the girl's height. How are you feeling here? The sisters are nice, Lily replied, but I wanted to go home. Lily, do you remember seeing any man visiting your grandmother? A man in a big truck? The girl's face immediately closed up and she stepped back a few paces. I don't like him. He made Grandma sad. Do you remember what he was like? Big, with grey hair. He talked loudly, and Grandma always cried after he left. Lily hesitated, then whispered, The last time, they argued a lot. He yelled that Grandma couldn't take care of me anymore. Sarah's heart tightened. And what happened after that? Grandma got really sick. Suddenly, you know. In the morning she was fine, playing with me in the yard, and in the afternoon she was gone. Sarah hugged the girl, feeling a growing anger toward whoever was responsible for all that suffering. Lily, I'm going to find out the truth about what happened to your grandmother. And I'm going to find your real family, okay? At Frank's ranch, David was beginning to better understand the operation happening there. During his days of forced labor, he had observed that not all workers were treated the same way. Some seemed to have more freedom, received regular pay, and slept in better accommodations. Others, like him, lived in precarious conditions and were constantly watched. It was Mike who finally explained the situation to him during a water break. Look, mister, the older man said, looking nervously around. I've been working here for 15 years, so I know how things work. There are 2 kinds of workers here. Those who work voluntarily and those who don't have a choice. What do you mean they don't have a choice? People who owe the boss money, who he blackmailed somehow, or who simply know too much about his business. Mike lowered his voice even more. There are people here who have been trying to pay off their debts for years, but they just keep increasing. Food, lodging, tools, everything is deducted from the wages, which are already low. David felt a revolt swelling in his chest. That's forced labor. "Don't say those words here," Mike whispered, terrified. "The boss has ears everywhere, and he has influence in town too. Mayor, sheriff, judge. They all owe him favors. How did he get so much power?" Mike hesitated for a long moment before answering. "These lands here didn't originally belong to him. They belonged to a family, the Petersons. But 15 years ago well, some died, others disappeared. The boss got the documents somehow." David's blood ran cold. "Petersons. Victoria Peterson. Did you know her?" Mike asked, surprised. "She was from the family that lived here. A beautiful, smart girl. They say she found out something about the boss's dirty dealings and, well, she was never seen again." David felt like he had been punched in the stomach. Victoria wasn't just his missing wife. She was the legitimate owner of the lands Frank now controlled. This explained a lot about the rancher's motivations. "Mike," he said carefully, "where exactly did the Petersons stay before all this happened?" "In the big house, the same one the boss lives in now. But he made a lot of changes, built new rooms, changed the structure. There are places there that are off limits to everyone. Like that upstairs window that's always closed." Mike paled. "Mister, for goodness sake, don't talk about that. That kind of curiosity has made people disappear around here." That afternoon, while working under the scorching sun, David paid closer attention to Frank's routine. The rancher always ate lunch alone in the house, then took an hour-long nap in a hammock on the porch. It was during this period that some workers could rest too, and surveillance was more relaxed. Taking advantage of a moment when Frank was asleep and the foremen were distracted, David managed to get closer to the main house. He found a side door leading to a pantry that was, surprisingly, unlocked. The interior of the house was dark and stuffy, smelling of mold and something else he couldn't quite place. He silently climbed the wooden stairs, each step creaking menacingly under his feet. Upstairs, there was a hallway with 4 doors. 3 were open, showing normal rooms, but the 4th at the end of the hall was secured with multiple locks. That's when he heard the sound. It was low, almost imperceptible, but definitely human. Someone was humming behind that locked door. A sad, melancholic melody that made his heart race. "Victoria?" he whispered, pressing his ear to the door. The sound stopped immediately. David tried the locks, but they were all high security. He needed the keys, and he was sure Frank kept them on him at all times. "Victoria, is that you?" he whispered again. "It's me, David. I came to get you." There was movement on the other side of the door, then a weak, almost inaudible voice. "Go away. He'll hurt you if he finds out." David's heart exploded with joy and despair at the same time. It was her. She was alive. After 15 years, he had finally found his wife. "Victoria, I'm going to get you out of here. I'll find a way." "David?" The voice became stronger, disbelieving. "David, is that really you? But they said you had died, and our daughter, our baby." "Lily is alive," he said quickly. "She's safe. I came looking for both of you." The silence that followed was long and filled with emotion. When Victoria finally spoke again, her voice was choked with tears. 15 years. 15 years I believed I had lost both of you. He told me you died in an accident, that I was the only survivor, that he was protecting me. He lied about everything, David said, fighting to keep his voice down despite the emotion. "I need to get you out of here, but first I need to find out where he keeps the keys." "David, be careful. He's dangerous. He killed my entire family to take our land. If he finds out you're here..." At that moment, David heard heavy footsteps coming up the stairs. His blood froze. "Someone's coming," he whispered. "I'll be back, Victoria. Don't give up. I'm going to get you out of here." He ran out of the hallway, descended the stairs as silently as possible, and managed to exit the house through the side door seconds before Frank appeared in the kitchen. When he returned to work in the peach orchard, his companions immediately noticed his agitation. "You okay, mister?" Mike asked, concerned. "You look like you saw a ghost." David looked at the man who had been his only reliable source of information and made a risky decision. "Mike, if I can get proof of the crimes Frank is committing here, would you and the other workers help me report him?" Mike looked around nervously, then slowly nodded. "If you can guarantee our protection, yes. We're all tired of living in fear." That night, while the other workers slept, David stayed awake planning. He had found Victoria, but saving her would be much more complicated than he had imagined. He needed the keys, he needed a way to get off the property undetected, and most importantly, he needed outside help. What he didn't know was that in town, Sarah was moving mountains to reach him, and that little Lily in the shelter had begun to remember important details about the man who visited her grandmother. Details that could be the key to exposing Frank once and for all. In the shelter, Lily woke up in the middle of the night with a memory that made her sit up in bed, startled. She had dreamed of Grandma Clara's voice, but it wasn't a common dream. It was a real memory of a conversation she had overheard hidden behind the door in the last week of her grandmother's life. "Sister Margaret," she called softly, getting out of bed and walking to the nun's room. The sister woke up immediately, worried. "What is it, my child? Did you have a nightmare?" "It wasn't a nightmare. I remembered something important." Lily sat on the edge of the bed, her big eyes shining in the dim light. "The bad man who visited Grandma. I hid and heard him talking to himself." "Talking to himself how, dear?" "After Grandma cried and went inside, he stayed on the porch talking on the phone. He was talking about a woman who knew too much." Lily paused, trying to organize the words. "He said she was well guarded, and that now all that was left was to solve the girl's problem." Sister Margaret felt a chill. "Are you sure of what you heard?" "Yes, I am. And he said a name, Victoria. He said Victoria was causing trouble even locked up." The nun immediately got up. "Lily, I need to call Aunt Sarah right now. This is very important." Meanwhile, at the ranch, David managed to convince Mike to help him with a risky plan. In the early hours when everyone was asleep, the two men discreetly met at the tool shed. "Mister, are you sure about what you're doing?" Mike whispered. "If the boss finds out—" "Mike, there's an innocent woman locked up in that house for 15 years, and other workers are being exploited. I can't just pretend I don't know about it." The older man sighed deeply. "All right. What do you need me to do?" "I need you to help me find out where Frank keeps the keys to that room. And I need a distraction to get back into the house. He always keeps the keys on his belt, but at night he leaves them in a desk drawer in the office. I know because I've cleaned in there a few times." "Perfect. And the distraction?" Mike thought for a moment. "Tomorrow afternoon, I can cause a problem with the peach processing machine. That will make the boss leave the house for at least an hour." David shook the man's hand gratefully. "Thank you. You're risking a lot for me." "It's not just for you, mister. It's for all of us. This man has ruined many lives." The next morning, Sarah received the call from Sister Margaret at 5 in the morning. The information Lily had remembered confirmed her worst suspicions and gave her the certainty that she needed to act immediately. First, she called Detective Thompson in Richmond. "I need official support for an operation in Harmony Creek. We have evidence of unlawful imprisonment and forced labor. Ms. Miller, this is very serious. We need to follow protocols. Detective, a woman has been held captive for 15 years, and a man is being held against his will. Every hour we lose could mean lives are at risk." After much insistence, she managed to get the detective to agree to send 2 investigators to accompany her, but they wouldn't arrive until late afternoon. Sarah couldn't wait that long. She decided to make an unofficial visit to the ranch, disguised as a routine social services inspection. She wore formal clothes, took her official ID, and drove to Frank Wallace's property. The ranch gate was open, and she drove up to the main house. Frank received her on the porch, clearly surprised and uncomfortable with the unexpected visit. "How can I help you?" he asked, trying to appear cordial. I'm Sarah Miller from Harmony Creek Child Protective Services. I'm investigating the situation of a child who lived with Clara Jones. I understand you knew the family. Frank hesitated for just a second, but it was long enough for Sarah to notice. Clara Jones. Oh yes, an elderly woman who lived in town. I knew her, bought some produce from her garden now and then. I see. And did you know she was taking care of a 4-year-old girl? Yes, I did. An orphaned child, if I recall. Sarah studied the man's face carefully. Do you know who the child's parents were? No idea. Clara never mentioned it. Strange, Sarah said, pretending to consult some notes, because we have information that you visited her house regularly, especially in the weeks leading up to her passing. Frank's face hardened slightly. Who told you that? Neighbors. They reported that you were there just days before her death. Must be a mistake. I didn't visit anyone. At that moment, Sarah heard a sound that made her stop completely. It was a feminine voice humming, coming from the upper floor of the house. A sad, melancholic melody that seemed to carry years of suffering. Who is singing? She asked. Frank was visibly nervous. Oh, that's the radio. My maid likes music. Can I meet your maid? As part of the inspection, I need to verify if there are other children on the property. She is occupied right now. Perhaps another time. Sarah knew she was being stalled, but she also realized that Frank was getting increasingly tense. She decided to press further. Mr. Wallace, I also need to ask some questions about your workers. We have reports that some of them are living in inadequate conditions. My workers are well treated, he replied defensively. Then you won't mind if I visit the bunkhouse? Of course not, Frank lied, but Sarah could see sweat forming on his forehead. They walked toward the back of the property, where the workers' accommodations were located. Sarah observed everything closely, the precarious conditions of the buildings, the lack of proper sanitation, the look of fear on the faces of the men working in the peach orchards. That's when she saw David. Even dirty and in simple clothes, there was something familiar about the tall man bent over the peach trees. When he looked up and their eyes met, she was sure it was the same man from the photos in the Richmond police files. David also recognized her from the uniform and the official demeanor. His eyes widened, and he made an almost imperceptible movement with his head, as if asking for help. That man, Sarah said to Frank. How long has he worked here? I don't know exactly. Mike handles the hiring of temporary workers. Sarah approached David, pretending a routine inspection. How are you being treated here? She asked. David glanced quickly at Frank, who was watching them closely, then replied carefully, I'm fine, ma'am. But his eyes said something completely different. They screamed for help, for salvation, for someone to understand that he was there against his will. Sarah made some notes on her clipboard, then turned to Frank. I need to see the employment contracts and payment records for your employees. That's at the office in the city. I don't have it here. Then we'll have to schedule a new visit with those documents. Sarah made a few more notes. And I need the full names of all the workers to verify that their documentation is in order. Frank was clearly uncomfortable now. Ma'am, that's not necessary. It's standard procedure, Mr. Wallace, especially when there are reports. What reports? Sarah didn't answer, just kept writing. In reality, she was stalling for time, trying to think of a way to help David without putting everyone in greater danger. That's when she heard the female voice again coming from the house, this time louder, as if the person was agitated. The words weren't clear, but the tone was one of distress. Mr. Wallace, she said firmly, I need to enter the house to complete my inspection. It's mandatory to check all premises where people might be residing. There's no need. The house is just my private residence. Then there will be no problem for me to take a look. The standoff was established. Frank couldn't officially deny it without raising more suspicions, but he also couldn't let her discover Victoria. It was in that tense moment that one of the workers yelled from the orchard, "Boss, the machine broke down. Oil is leaking everywhere." Frank cursed under his breath. It was exactly the distraction Mike had promised to create, but at the most inconvenient moment possible. "I need to deal with this," he said to Sarah. "Can you come back tomorrow?" "Unfortunately, no. I need to finish the inspection today." Frank looked from the problem in the orchard to Sarah, clearly torn between two urgent issues. Finally, he opted for what he considered the most immediate risk. "All right, wait here. I'll be right back." It shouldn't take long. He practically ran toward the orchard, leaving Sarah alone near the house. It was the opportunity she needed, but she also knew she had little time before he returned. Sarah didn't waste a moment. As soon as Frank disappeared toward the orchard, she ran to the main house. The front door was unlocked, and she entered silently, her heart pounding in her chest. The interior of the house was dark and oppressive, smelling of mold and something she couldn't identify. She quickly climbed the stairs, following the sound of the female voice she had heard earlier. In the upstairs hallway, she found 3 open doors and 1 closed, with multiple locks. "Hello," she called softly by the locked door. "Is anyone there?" The answer came immediately, a weak but desperate female voice. "Help me, please. I've been trapped here for so long." "My name is Sarah. I'm a social worker. Are you Victoria?" An emotion-filled silence, then, "How do you know my name?" "Who told you?" "Your daughter. Lily is safe." The sound that came from behind the door was a sob of relief and desperation mixed together. "Lily is alive. My baby is alive." "Yes, she is, and she's looking for you. Your husband, too. David is here on the ranch." "I know. He managed to talk to me yesterday, but you have to leave before Frank gets back. He's dangerous. He's killed people." Sarah examined the locks. They were too sophisticated to be broken without the right tools. "Where does he keep the keys?" "In the office, in a desk drawer. But you don't have time." Sarah ran down to the ground floor and found the office. It was a somber room, full of papers and documents scattered on a large wooden desk. She opened drawer after drawer until she found a bunch of keys, but it was when she saw the documents on the table that her blood ran cold. There were property deeds, fake death certificates, and what looked like a detailed plan of how to appropriate land through forged documentation. Among the papers, she found the fake death certificate for Victoria Peterson, dated 15 years ago, and documents that transferred the Peterson family property to Frank Wallace. Even more frightening, there was a folder with detailed information about Clara Jones, including photos of the house where she lived with Lily, records of her daily routines, and a plan to eliminate witnesses. Sarah pulled out her phone and quickly photographed the most important documents, then ran upstairs with the keys. Her hands were trembling as she tried to unlock the door, and when she finally managed to open it, she found a woman who was too thin, with grey hair and deep-set eyes, but who still held traces of the beauty she must have possessed 15 years ago. Victoria was sitting on a simple bed in the corner of a small, windowless room, wearing old, ragged clothes. "Victoria?" Sarah whispered. The woman got up with difficulty, her legs trembling after years of confinement. "Are you real? Am I not dreaming? It's real. We're getting you out of here now. I can't leave like this. He said if I tried to escape, he'd kill Lily. For all these years I thought she was dead. But when I found out she was alive..." "Lily is safe, in a protected shelter. Frank can't hurt her anymore." Victoria began to cry, 15 years of contained suffering finally finding release. "He killed my entire family, my parents, my brother, everyone. He said if I didn't sign the documents transferring our land to him, he would kill David and our daughter too. The documents you signed, where are they? He forged them later, made it look like I had died in the same accident that killed my family, but I saved evidence before he locked me up here." "What evidence?" Victoria pointed to a loose floorboard. "Underneath." Original documents, recordings I made secretly, evidence of all his crimes. Sarah lifted the board and found a metal box containing documents, photographs, and an old recorder. It was a treasure trove of evidence that could completely destroy Frank. "We have to leave now," Sarah said, helping Victoria to stand. "Can you walk?" "I think so. It's been so long since I left this room." They descended the stairs slowly, Victoria leaning on Sarah. When they reached the front door, they heard voices approaching. Frank was coming back, and he sounded angry. "This way," Sarah whispered, leading Victoria out the back door. But they weren't fast enough. As they crossed the yard, Frank appeared on the porch, his eyes widening when he saw the two women. "What the devil is going on here?" he roared, descending the porch steps like an enraged bull. "Mr. Wallace," Sarah said, trying to stay calm. "This woman was being held in unlawful imprisonment. That's a felony. She's mentally ill. I was taking care of her out of charity." "Liar!" Victoria yelled, finding strength she didn't know she still possessed. "You killed my family. You stole our land. You kept me locked up here for 15 years. Frank lunged toward them, but at that moment David appeared running, along with Mike and other workers. The distraction in the orchard had allowed them to organize. "Don't come any closer to them," David shouted, positioning himself protectively between Frank and the women. "Victoria!" He ran to his wife, embracing her tightly after 15 years of separation. "My love, I knew you were alive. I never stopped looking." The reunion was interrupted by Frank's threatening voice. "You're not leaving here. Not after everything you've seen." "Too late," Sarah said, showing her phone. "I've already photographed all the documents in your office, and the police are on their way." It was a lie about the police. They wouldn't arrive until late afternoon. But Frank didn't know that. "Mike!" Frank yelled at the oldest worker. "Grab these people!" But Mike shook his head. "No, boss, I'm tired of being afraid of you. We're all tired." The other workers positioned themselves beside Mike, creating a human barrier between Frank and the fugitive group. "You don't know who you're messing with," Frank threatened. "I have powerful friends. Sheriff, mayor, judge. No one will believe your word over mine." "They'll have to," Victoria said, her voice gaining strength. "Because I have recordings of every conversation you had with me over the last 15 years, including confessing to my family's murders." Frank's face turned pale. "That's impossible. I searched your room 1,000 times. You never looked in the right place," she said, clutching the box of evidence to her chest. At that moment, the sound of sirens began to echo in the distance. Sarah smiled. Apparently, the Richmond investigators had arrived earlier than expected. Frank looked around, seeing himself surrounded by rebellious workers, with his victims freed and evidence of his crimes in hand. For a moment it seemed he would try to run, but then his shoulders slumped, defeated. "You don't know what you've done," he murmured. "You don't know the consequences of this." "The only consequences," David said, embracing Victoria protectively, "are that you're going to pay for everything you've done, and that our family is finally going to be reunited." When the police cars entered the property, they found a scene that would tell the full story. Frank sitting on the porch steps, defeated, workers celebrating their freedom, and a couple embracing after 15 years of forced separation, holding evidence that would definitively incriminate the man who had destroyed so many lives. But there was still a fundamental piece missing from the family reunion. Lily was miles away, at the shelter, unaware that her parents had finally met and that soon, very soon, she would have the complete family she had always dreamed of having. Sarah looked at David and Victoria, who couldn't seem to stop hugging, and smiled. Her next mission would be the happiest of her career, reuniting a 4-year-old girl with the parents she had never truly known. The Harmony Creek Sheriff's Department had never seen such a complex case. Sheriff Thompson, a 50-year-old experienced officer, looked at the evidence scattered on his desk with a mixture of shock and indignation. Victoria's recordings were clear. Frank confessing to the murder of the Peterson family, detailing how he forged documents, and describing coldly how he kept Victoria prisoner for 15 years. "It's one of the most serious cases I've ever seen," he told Sarah, who had spent the night at the station organizing the evidence. "Multiple homicide, unlawful imprisonment, forced labor, document forgery. This man is going to be locked up for the rest of his life." Sarah nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. "Sheriff, I need to take David and Victoria to reunite with their daughter. Lily has been at the shelter for 2 days, and I can't explain to her where her parents are. I understand your urgency, but Victoria needs a medical evaluation first. 15 years of forced isolation that leaves scars." That was exactly what worried Sarah. During the night, while David and Victoria gave their depositions, she had noticed some strange behaviors in the woman. Victoria sometimes talked to herself, had moments of temporal confusion, and occasionally seemed not to recognize where she was. At the municipal hospital, Dr. Alan Finch, a psychiatrist specializing in trauma, examined Victoria while David waited anxiously in the hallway. 15 years of forced isolation, the doctor murmured to Sarah after the initial exam. "It's a miracle she maintained any sanity. But there are clear signs of severe post-traumatic stress disorder and dissociative episodes." "What does that mean?" David asked, having overheard the conversation. "It means your wife will need intensive treatment," the doctor explained gently. "Sometimes she may not recognize familiar faces, have intense flashbacks, or confuse the present with the past. It's as if her mind created defense mechanisms to survive the trauma." David felt like he had been punched in the gut. "But she recognized me at the ranch. We talked. She knew who I was." "That can vary. In moments of stress or in unfamiliar environments, the symptoms can intensify." As if to prove the doctor's point, Victoria appeared at the consultation room door, looking around with a confused expression. When she saw David, her face lit up for a moment, but then darkened again. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly, "but could you tell me what time it is? I need to get home before my parents worry." The silence that followed was painful. Victoria was clearly confused about where and when she was. For her, at that moment, she was still a young woman living with her parents, whom Frank had murdered 15 years ago. "Victoria," David said softly, approaching slowly. "It's me, David, your husband." She studied him for a long moment, as if trying to fit together pieces of a puzzle. "David? But you look older. And where are we? This isn't our city's hospital." Dr. Finch intervened gently. "Victoria, you are safe now. We'll talk about where you are and what happened, but slowly, at your pace." Over the next few hours, the reality of the situation became clear to everyone. Victoria had moments of total lucidity, where she remembered everything: the kidnapping, the years of imprisonment, even the recent conversations with David. But she also had episodes where her mind transported her back to different periods of her life, as a defense mechanism against the pain. "The most important thing," explained Dr. Finch, "is that with proper treatment, she can recover significantly. But it will take time." Sarah watched it all with a heavy heart. How would she explain to Lily that she had found her mother, but that her mother was ill and might not recognize her immediately? "Doctor," she asked, "is Victoria in a condition to meet her daughter?" "As long as it's in a controlled environment and with psychological support. In fact, seeing Lily can be therapeutic. Sometimes deep emotional bonds can help with recovery." David, who had remained silent during the medical explanation, finally spoke up. 15 years waiting for this moment, and now I don't know if she'll recognize our daughter." "She will," Sarah said with conviction. "Maybe not immediately, maybe not consistently, but a mother's love doesn't disappear even after trauma. I've seen it in other cases." That afternoon, Sarah returned to the shelter to talk to Lily. The girl ran to hug her as soon as she saw her, her eyes shining with anticipation. "Aunt Sarah, did you find my family?" Sarah knelt down to the girl's height. "Yes, I did, sweetheart. I found your dad and your mom. Lily let out a little scream of joy. "Can I see them? Can I go home with them?" "Yes, you can, but first I need to explain something important to you." Sarah chose her words carefully. "Your mommy has been sick for a long time. Sometimes she might be confused, not remember things. That doesn't mean she doesn't love you. It means she needs special care. Like Grandma Clara when she was forgetful sometimes? Similar to that. Are you going to help take care of her?" "Yes, I am," Lily replied without hesitation. "I'll help her get better." The reunion was scheduled for the next morning in the hospital garden, a neutral and calm environment. Dr. Finch would be present, as well as a nurse specializing in child trauma. That night, David couldn't sleep. He was at the hotel near the hospital, looking out the window at the lights of the town where his daughter had grown up without him. 15 years lost. 15 years when Lily needed him, and he didn't even know she existed. Victoria was sedated in the hospital, under medical observation. During the day, she had had several episodes of confusion, but also moments of impressive clarity, where she remembered specific details about baby Lily. She had a birthmark on her arm, she had told David in a lucid moment. "A crescent moon shape. I used to kiss that little mark every day." It was the first time David had heard about the birthmark. More proof that Lily truly was his daughter, another connection that time and circumstances could not erase. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the shelter to pick up Lily. The girl had woken up early, showered on her own, and chosen her prettiest dress, the same one she had worn on her first day at the shelter. "I'm ready, Aunt Sarah," she said, holding a sheet of paper. "I drew a picture for Mommy and Daddy. It was a simple drawing made with crayons, a small house with 3 figures holding hands in front. Above them, a colorful bird flew. It's beautiful, sweetheart. They will love it." The ride to the hospital was silent. Lily looked out the window, clearly nervous but also excited. Her small hands tightly held the drawing as if it were a talisman. "Aunt Sarah," she said when they arrived at the hospital parking lot, "what if they don't like me?" "Impossible," Sarah replied, taking the girl's hand. "They loved you even before you were born. They've just been looking for you all this time." In the hospital garden, David was waiting, sitting on a bench, visibly nervous. When he saw Sarah approaching with a small girl, his heart almost stopped. Lily was exactly as he had imagined she would be. Brown hair like Victoria's, large, expressive eyes, small for her age, but with a posture that showed impressive inner strength. "Lily," Sarah said softly, "this is your dad, David." The girl looked at the tall man who got up from the bench, and something inside her recognized that face, even without ever having seen it before. It was as if an important piece of her life finally clicked into place. "Daddy," she said timidly. David knelt down, tears streaming down his face. "Hi, my princess. Daddy has been looking for you for a very, very long time." Lily took a few hesitant steps toward him, then ran and threw herself into his arms. It was an embrace of 15 years of longing, of a desperate search finally coming to an end. "I knew you would come," she murmured against his chest. "Grandma Clara always said my daddy would come get me one day." But the hardest part of the reunion was still ahead. Introducing Lily to the mother she had never truly known, and who might not recognize her immediately due to the trauma she had suffered. Dr. Finch watched carefully through the window of the hospital room where Victoria was resting. She had had an agitated night, alternating between moments of lucidity and episodes of temporal confusion. In the morning, when she learned she would meet her daughter, she had an anxiety attack that required mild medication to control. "She's better now," the doctor told David and Sarah. "But we need to be prepared for any reaction. 15 years without seeing her daughter, combined with the trauma. It's a very delicate situation." Lily waited in the hallway, tightly holding David's hand. During the hour they had spent together in the garden, father and daughter had formed an immediate and natural connection. She had told him about her life with Grandma Clara, about the difficult months alone, and he had explained in simple terms that he had always looked for her, and that they would never be separated again. "Daddy," she said now, looking at the room door, "will Mommy like me?" "She's going to love you more than anything in the world," David replied, but his voice trembled slightly. Internally, he too was afraid of how the meeting would go. Dr. Finch slowly opened the door. "Victoria is awake and calm. She remembers you were coming to visit her. Let's go in slowly. No rush." The room was simple but cozy, with flowers David had brought on the bedside table. Victoria was sitting in the armchair near the window, wearing a light blue hospital gown. Her hair had been brushed, and she seemed more alert than the day before. When she saw David enter, her face lit up with recognition. "David! You came to see me again?" "Of course I did, and I brought someone very special to meet you." Victoria looked curiously beyond him and saw a small girl hiding behind her husband's legs. For a moment, her face showed no recognition at all. Then slowly, something shifted in her expression. "A child," she said softly. "What a beautiful girl." Lily took a timid step forward, still holding David's hand. "Hi," she said in her small voice. Victoria observed her in silence for a few seconds, as if trying to remember something important. "You have very beautiful eyes," she finally said. "They remind me of someone—" "Victoria," David said gently. "This is Lily, our daughter." Victoria's reaction was unexpected. Instead of the immediate recognition everyone expected, she seemed confused. "Daughter? But our daughter is a baby. She's right here," she said, touching her own belly. "She's still growing." Dr. Finch subtly signaled to David, indicating that Victoria was having a regressive episode where her mind was returning to the period of her pregnancy. Lily, however, did not understand the complexity of the situation. To her, her mother's reaction meant only one thing: she wasn't wanted. "She doesn't want to be my mommy," Lily whispered, tears starting to stream down her small face. It was then that something extraordinary happened. Hearing the child's cry, something deep stirred inside Victoria. It was as if a locked door in her mind suddenly opened. She looked at Lily, truly looked, and saw not just a strange child, but familiar traits, characteristics she had dreamed of for years. "Wait," she said, rising from the armchair with uncertain movements. "That cry. I know that cry." Victoria approached Lily slowly, kneeling down to the girl's height. "You used to cry like that when you were a baby," she said, her voice gaining a clarity it hadn't had moments ago. "I used to sing to you to stop crying." Lily stopped sobbing, looking into the eyes of the woman in front of her. "You sang to me." "Yes, I did. A song about songbirds." Victoria began to hum softly a sweet, melancholic melody. Fly away, little songbird, in the blue sky of my backyard." Lily's eyes widened. "I know that song. Grandma Clara used to sing it to me." "Because I taught it to her," Victoria said, memories flooding back like an avalanche. "I asked her to take care of you when they took me away." Tears began to stream down Victoria's face, but they were tears of relief, of recognition, of maternal love that could finally express itself. "My baby," she whispered, holding out her arms. "My Lily, you've grown so much, you've become so beautiful." Lily hesitated for just a second before running into her mother's arms. When Victoria embraced her, it was as if 15 years of separation instantly vanished. "Mommy," Lily said against Victoria's neck, "I always knew you would come back." The hug between mother and daughter lasted long minutes, while David watched with his heart overflowing with emotion, and Dr. Finch made mental notes about the therapeutic power of family connections. "Lily," Victoria said, pulling back slightly to look at her daughter's face, "let me see you properly. Do you have the mark?" "What mark, Mommy?" "On your arm. A special little mark you were born with." Lily rolled up her dress sleeve, showing the crescent moon-shaped scar on her right arm. Victoria delicately touched the mark, as if it were something sacred. "I kissed this little Mark every day when you were a baby," she said, and she kissed Lily's arm exactly as she had 15 years ago. It was at that moment that something even more extraordinary happened. As if recognizing her daughter had unlocked something in her mind, Victoria suddenly remembered everything with crystal clear clarity. "David," she said, looking at her husband, "I remember everything now. Frank, the imprisonment, the lost years. But I also remember what he did with the evidence." "What evidence?" Sarah asked, approaching. "It wasn't just what you found in my room. Frank hid other evidence, documents that prove he killed other people besides my family. There's a place on the property, a hidden cellar underneath the tool shed." Dr. Finch intervened. "Victoria, are you sure? We don't want you to force yourself to remember traumatic things." "I'm sure. He thought I wasn't paying attention, but I overheard his phone calls. There are bodies buried on the property. There are documents that prove connections with corrupt officials. There's evidence of dozens of crimes." David held his wife's hand. "You don't need to worry about that now. Frank has already been arrested. But the families of the other victims deserve to know the truth, and the corrupt officials need to be exposed too." Sarah picked up her phone. "I'm calling Sheriff Thompson immediately. This information could dismantle a much larger network of corruption." While Sarah made the call, Lily remained glued to Victoria, as if afraid her mother might disappear again. "Mommy," she said, "are we going to live together now? Me, you, and Daddy?" Victoria looked at David, and for the first time in 15 years, her eyes shone with genuine hope for the future. "Yes, we are, my dear. We're going to be a real family. But first, Dr. Finch said gently, "Your mother needs to stay a few more days in the hospital, receiving treatment. You can visit every day." "Can I sleep here with her?" Lily asked. "Lily can stay with me during the day," David said. "I'm looking for a house for the three of us here in Harmony Creek, a new place where we can start our life together." "With a yard?" Lily asked hopefully. "For the songbirds." Victoria laughed, the first genuine laugh she had had in 15 years. "With a yard, yes. And we're going to plant flowers to attract all the songbirds in the area." That afternoon, when the visits ended, Victoria remained awake in her hospital bed, looking out the window at the blue sky of Harmony Creek. For the first time in 15 years, she had a real reason to want to get better, to fight the demons in her mind. Her daughter had grown up strong and brave, despite everything she had been through. Her husband had dedicated 15 years of his life looking for them. And now, finally, they had a chance to be the family they had always dreamed of being. But there was still important work to do. The information she had given about Frank's hidden crimes was about to open an investigation that would reveal the true extent of the corruption network that had protected the rancher for so many years. Justice would finally come not only for Victoria's family, but for all the victims Frank had created over the years. And all of this had begun with a 4-year-old girl looking for food in the trash and witnessing a scene that would change everyone's lives forever. The information provided by Victoria triggered an unprecedented police operation in the region. Sheriff Thompson coordinated a team of investigators from 3 counties to excavate the secret cellar she had mentioned. And what they found at Frank's ranch surpassed even the gloomiest expectations. 15 bodies, the sheriff reported to Sarah over the phone 3 days after the family reunion. 15 people who disappeared over the last 20 years. Entire families who questioned Frank's suspicious dealings. Sarah was at the hospital, watching Lily play in the room with small toys David had bought. The girl had quickly adapted to the routine of spending her days with her father and afternoons with her mother at the hospital. "And the corrupt officials?" she asked softly, so as not to interrupt Lily's play. "Mayor, former sheriff, 2 retired judges, and a prosecutor. They all received money from Frank to turn a blind eye to his crimes. We found bank records, recordings, bribery documents. It's a network that had been operating for decades. The impact of the revelations shook the entire region. Families who had lost loved ones finally had answers. Workers who had been exploited received compensation. And the small town of Harmony Creek began a painful but necessary process of cleaning up its institutions. For David, the last few weeks had been an emotional roller coaster. On one hand, the indescribable joy of having found his family. On the other, the pain of seeing Victoria's mental state and the lost time with Lily. "Daddy," Lily said that afternoon as they walked through the town's Central Park. "When is Mummy leaving the hospital?" "Soon, Princess. She's getting better very quickly." It was true. Dr. Finch was impressed with the speed of Victoria's recovery. The reunion with her daughter had acted as a powerful catalyst, unlocking memories and emotional capacities that the trauma had suppressed. "And where are we going to live?" Lily asked, stopping to watch a group of children playing on the playground. David had spent the week looking for a suitable house for his rebuilt family. He wanted something special, a place where they could create new, happy memories to replace the years of suffering. "I found a beautiful house," he said, crouching down next to his daughter. "It has a big yard, fruit trees, and a perfect little spot for you to play. Can I plant flowers? You can plant whatever you want. We'll make it the prettiest garden in town." That afternoon, when they returned to the hospital, they found Victoria visibly animated. She had spent the morning talking with a social worker specializing in family reintegration and was eager to share the news. "David, Lily," she said as soon as she saw them. "The doctor said I can be discharged next week if I keep progressing like this." Lily ran to hug her mother, a routine that had established itself naturally between them. "Mummy, Daddy found a house for us." "Did he?" Victoria looked at David with shining eyes. "Tell me about it." David described the house he had found, a simple but cozy construction with 3 bedrooms, a spacious living room, a kitchen overlooking the garden, and a roomy backyard surrounded by trees. It was in a quiet neighborhood, far from Frank's ranch, but still within Harmony Creek. "Why here?" Victoria asked. "Wouldn't it be better to go back to Richmond, where you have your company?" David had thought a lot about that. "I can manage the company remotely. And Lily grew up here, she has roots here. Besides, you'll need to continue treatment with Dr. Finch." "And I like it here," Lily said. "I know the streets, the people. Mrs. Peterson, Grandma Clara's neighbor, always gave me cookies." Victoria smiled, touching her daughter's hair. It was impressive how the girl had developed ties with the community, even in the difficult circumstances in which she lived. "Then we'll stay right here," she decided. "We'll build our life here." "Doctor." Finch appeared at the room door, interrupting the family conversation. "Excuse me. Can I talk to you for a moment?" "Of course, Doctor," David said. "You can speak in front of Lily. She's part of all this." "Well, I wanted to let you know that Victoria is responding to treatment better than any medical prediction. Family support is proving fundamental to her recovery." Lily looked at the doctor seriously. "Does that mean she won't get confused anymore?" "It might happen sometimes, especially when she's very tired or stressed, but those episodes will become increasingly rare. And if she gets confused, I'll help her remember," Lily said with determination. "I'll sing the songbird's song." The child's simplicity and wisdom moved everyone present. Dr. Finch made some notes and then addressed David. "There's something else I need to discuss with you. Victoria will need continuous psychological follow-up, but she will also need an activity that makes her feel useful, that gives purpose to her life." "I've thought about that," Victoria said. 15 years locked up gave me a lot of time to think. I want to help other people who have gone through similar traumas, maybe study psychology or work in social services." Sarah, who had arrived during the conversation, smiled upon hearing this. "The City Council is restructuring the entire social services system after the scandal. We're going to need people with experience in overcoming trauma. It would be a volunteer job initially," she explained, but with the possibility of becoming a paid position as you specialize. Victoria looked at David and Lily. What do you think? I think you would be amazing at it, David said. You have a strength that few people possess. And I can help too, Lily said. I can draw for the sad children and teach the songbird song. In the following weeks, the family's life began to take shape. David finalized the purchase of the house and began the necessary renovations to make it perfect for their specific needs. He installed a discreet but efficient security system, created a special corner in the yard where Lily could play, and converted one of the bedrooms into an office where he could work remotely. Victoria was discharged from the hospital on the day they completed exactly 1 month since the rescue from the ranch. Dr. Finch would continue to follow up with her weekly, but now she could sleep at home, wake up next to her family, and begin the process of truly rebuilding her life. The first night the reunited family spent in the new house was both emotional and strange. 15 years of separation don't disappear overnight, and everyone was learning to live together, to respect each other's spaces and limitations. "Mommy," Lily said at bedtime, "can you sing the songbird song?" Victoria sat on the edge of her daughter's bed, in the room David had decorated with bird drawings on the walls. She began to hum the melody she had sung when Lily was a baby, and that Clara had kept alive all those years. Fly away, little songbird, in the blue sky of my backyard. Fly high, fly free, may love always keep you safe. When the song ended, Lily was almost asleep. "Mommy," she murmured, "now I know I'll never be alone again." Victoria kissed her daughter's forehead, delicately touched the birthmark on her arm, and whispered, "Never again, my love, never again." From the hallway, David watched the scene with his heart overflowing. 15 years of desperate searching had finally led to this moment. His family reunited, safe, and beginning to build the future they had always dreamed of having. But there were still challenges ahead. Victoria needed to keep recovering. Lily needed to adapt to having present parents after years of fending for herself, and they all needed to learn to be a family again. It was the beginning of a new story, a story of healing, love, and hope born from the ashes of suffering. 6 months after the family reunion, life in Harmony Creek had found a more stable rhythm, but new challenges arose as the family integrated more deeply into the community. Lily had become one of the most beloved students at the school, her natural intelligence and capacity for observation impressing teachers and peers. Victoria had started working as a volunteer at the Social Services Center, helping vulnerable families, finding purpose in transforming her pain into help for others. That September morning, Sarah appeared at the Harrisons' door with a worried expression that immediately alerted David. "Did something happen?" he asked, inviting her in. "I need to talk to you about a delicate situation," Sarah said, accepting the coffee Victoria offered her. "Do you remember Frank Wallace's cousin, Lisa Wallace?" Victoria immediately tensed. During the months of investigation, they had discovered that Frank had relatives who, although not directly involved in his crimes, had benefited financially from his illegal activities. "What does she want?" David asked, instinctively positioning himself protectively near his wife. "She's contesting the return of the land to Victoria. She claims that Frank legitimately bought the properties and that, as his only living heir, she has a right to the land." Lily, who was playing on the living room rug, looked up when she heard the serious tone of the conversation. She had learned to identify when adults were worried, a skill developed during her early years of life. "Is that possible?" Victoria asked, her voice betraying increasing anxiety. "Even with all the evidence of his crimes?" "Legally, it's a complex case," Sarah explained. "Lisa hired a lawyer from New York who is arguing that Frank's personal crimes don't automatically invalidate all the commercial transactions he made." David stood up, pacing nervously around the room. "But we have the original documents Victoria hid. We have proof that he forged the sales papers." "Yes, we do. But Lisa is claiming she didn't know that she acted in good faith when inheriting the properties. Her lawyer is requesting a hearing for a case review. Victoria covered her face with her hands. After all the progress she had made, the possibility of having to relive the trauma in court, of having to fight again for what was already legitimately hers, left her exhausted. "Mommy," Lily said, leaving her toys and approaching her mother, "are you sad?" "I'm a little worried, my dear," Victoria replied, hugging her daughter. "Is it because of the bad man?" "The bad man is in jail. It's because of people who want to take our house." Lily frowned, processing the information. "But this is our house. We live here." Sarah gently intervened. "Lily, it's not this house they might take. It's the big lands where you don't live, that belonged to your mommy's family a long time ago." "Oh," Lily said, seeming relieved. Then, with the simple logic of a child, "Then why is it important if we don't live there?" David knelt beside his daughter. "Because those lands are part of Mommy's family history, and because it's not right for bad people to keep things they stole." "Then are we going to fight to get it back?" Lily asked, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The simplicity of the question made the three adults smile, despite the tension. For Lily, the solution was obvious. If something had been stolen, it should be returned. "Yes, we are, Princess," David said. "We're going to fight." In the following weeks, the family found themselves once again immersed in legal matters. Stephen Ross, David's attorney, worked intensively with the prosecution team to strengthen the case. The evidence was solid, but the legal process would be long and stressful. Victoria started having nightmares again, waking up in the middle of the night in cold sweats. Dr. Finch adjusted her medication and increased the frequency of therapy sessions, but it was clear that the legal threat was affecting her recovery. "Sometimes I think it would be easier to give up," she confessed to David one sleepless night. "I just want to live in peace with our family." "I understand," he replied, hugging her. "But if we give up now, Lisa wins, and all the other families Frank harmed are left without justice. What if I can't get through another trial? What if I have a breakdown in front of everyone? Then I'll be there to support you. Lily will be there. Sarah will be there. You are not alone." The community support was also surprising. Families who had been helped by Victoria in her volunteer work organized a support movement. Workers who had been freed from Frank's ranch offered to testify. Even Victoria's former classmates showed up to show solidarity. "Miss Victoria," Mike said one afternoon when he appeared at the house door with a petition, "we all know what you went through, and we all want justice to be done." The document had over 200 signatures from residents of Harmony Creek and surrounding areas, all asking for the Peterson family lands to be returned to the rightful owner. Lily watched everything closely, learning about justice, community, and the importance of fighting for what is right. One afternoon, she surprised her parents with a profound question. "Daddy, if we win the land back, what are we going to do with it?" David and Victoria hadn't discussed that yet. The Peterson family lands were extensive and valuable, including peach orchards and pasture land. "What do you think we should do?" Victoria asked, curious about her daughter's perspective. "I think we should help people, like the people who worked for the bad man and weren't paid properly. They could plant things there and earn real money." Lily's suggestion planted a seed of an idea that quickly grew, an agricultural cooperative for formerly exploited workers, a project that would transform lands marked by oppression into a symbol of hope and new beginnings. "You are very smart, Princess," David said, impressed with his daughter's social vision. "Grandma Clara always said that when we suffer a lot, we learn to understand the suffering of others," Lily replied, repeating words of wisdom she had heard in the last months of her grandmother's life. Meanwhile, investigations into Lisa Wallace revealed interesting information. Although she claimed ignorance of her cousin's crimes, bank records showed regular money transfers from Frank to her accounts over the years. amounts that suspiciously coincided with the periods when he had appropriated properties. She knew, all right, Sheriff Thompson said during a meeting with the legal team. Maybe not the details, but she certainly knew the money came from questionable sources. Stephen Ross, the attorney, was confident. With this evidence, her case becomes much weaker. No judge will accept the argument of good faith when there are systematic transfers of suspicious amounts. The hearing was scheduled for May, 2 months later. It would be the first time Victoria appeared in court since she gave her deposition about her kidnapping. Dr. Finch worked intensively with her to prepare her psychologically. "Remember," he said during a session, "you are no longer the helpless victim who was kidnapped. You are a survivor, a mother, a woman who has rebuilt her life. You have power now." Lily, always attentive to her mother's needs, created her own form of support. She began drawing a series of figures she called My Strong Family, images of Victoria with a superhero cape, David protecting the family like a shield, and herself with wings, flying above all problems. "This is for you to take to court," she said, giving Victoria a drawing of the whole family holding hands, surrounded by colorful songbirds. "To remember that you are not alone." A week before the hearing, Sarah brought unexpected news. "Lisa Wallace wants to reach a settlement," she announced during dinner. "What kind of settlement?" David asked, suspicious. "She proposes to keep 40% of the land and pay compensation for the other 60%. Victoria remained silent for a long moment. "And do you think we should accept?" "Financially, it would be advantageous," Stephen admitted. "But symbolically, it would be accepting that she has some right to land that was stolen from my family," Victoria finished. Lily, listening attentively, asked a simple question. "Mommy, do you want to settle with the bad man's cousin?" The daughter's direct question helped Victoria clarify her feelings. "No, my dear, I don't." "Then we don't settle," Lily said, as if it were obvious. David smiled, once again admiring his daughter's simple wisdom. "We don't settle," he agreed. The decision was made. They would go to court to fight for the complete restitution of the Peterson family lands. It would be another battle in their journey of rebuilding, but now they knew they could face any challenge together. In the nights leading up to the hearing, Victoria practiced her testimony with David, while Lily listened and occasionally asked questions that helped clarify important points. It was a family preparing for war, but a war they were determined to win. The day of the hearing dawned cloudy, with a fine drizzle that seemed to reflect the tension hanging over the Harrison family. Victoria woke up before the alarm, after a sleepless night, and found Lily already awake in her bed, watching her with worried eyes. "Good morning, Mommy," the girl said softly. "Are you ready to be strong today?" The daughter's direct and affectionate question brought a smile to Victoria, even amid her anxiety. "Yes, I am, my dear. Especially because I have you and Daddy with me." David joined them in bed, creating a moment of family unity before what promised to be a challenging day. "Remember," he said, "no matter what happens today, we've already won the most important thing. We found each other. We are a family, and no one can take that away from us." Lily nodded solemnly, then pulled out from under her pillow the drawing she had made for her mother. "Mommy, when you get nervous in there, look at this drawing and remember that we love you." The Harmony Creek courthouse was packed when they arrived. News of the trial had spread throughout the region, and many people had come to support the Harrison family. Workers freed from Frank's ranch, families served by Victoria at the social center, neighbors, Lily's teachers, an entire community had mobilized to show solidarity. "Look how many people came to support you," Sarah said, moved by the display of support. Lisa Wallace arrived a few minutes later, accompanied by her New York attorney, an elegant man in an expensive suit that contrasted with the simplicity of the environment. She was a 50-year-old woman, well-dressed, but with hard eyes that avoided meeting Victoria's. "That's her," Lily murmured to David, observing Lisa with the keen perception she had developed to identify people who posed a threat. Judge Daniels, an experienced 60-year-old man known for his impartiality, opened the session by explaining that the hearing would determine the final destination of the properties that had belonged to the Peterson family. Stephen Ross, the Harrisons' attorney, first presented the evidence. He showed the original documents Victoria had hidden, the recordings where Frank confessed his crimes, the records of suspicious bank transfers to Lisa, and dozens of depositions from workers who had witnessed the illegal activities. "Your Honor," Stephen said with conviction, "there is no doubt that the properties in question were obtained through heinous crimes. The applicant, Lisa Wallace, cannot benefit from crimes committed by her cousin, especially when there is evidence that she received financial benefits from these criminal activities." Lisa's lawyer attempted to argue that his client had acted in good faith, that the money transfers were legitimate family gifts, and that there was no direct proof of her knowledge about Frank's crimes. "My client was a simple woman who trusted her cousin's word," he argued. "She had no way of knowing his dealings were illicit." It was then that the most crucial moment arrived: Victoria's testimony. When her name was called, Victoria stood up on trembling legs. She had rehearsed that moment hundreds of times, but being there, watched by dozens of people talking about the worst moments of her life, was still terrifying. Lily, who was in the front row of the public with David, made a discreet gesture showing the drawing and whispered, "You got this, Mommy." Victoria walked to the stand, took a deep breath, and began to speak. Her voice was weak at first, but it gradually gained strength as she told her story. "Your Honor, 15 years ago, I was a 25-year-old woman, married, pregnant, living on the land my family had owned for generations. Frank Wallace had approached us claiming interest in leasing part of the land for peach cultivation." She paused, unconsciously touching her belly, remembering when she was pregnant with Lily. "One night, armed men broke into our house. They killed my parents and my brother in front of me. Frank was with them. He told me that if I didn't sign the documents transferring our land to him, he would kill my husband and my daughter when she was born." A heavy silence took over the courtroom. Even knowing the story, hearing it from Victoria herself had a devastating impact. "I signed the documents," she continued, tears beginning to stream. "I signed because I was afraid he would carry out the threat, but then he told me he had changed his mind, that I knew too much to be free. He kept me prisoner for 15 years, making me believe my family had died in an accident." Victoria looked directly at Lisa, who finally raised her eyes to meet hers. "During those 15 years, I overheard Frank on several phone calls talking about money he was sending to his cousin Lisa. He always said it was to keep the family happy and quiet. On one specific occasion, I heard him tell her that the money came from the Peterson land, and that she should keep pretending not to know anything." Lisa's lawyer tried to stand up to protest, but the judge silenced him. "Are you sure of what you heard?" the judge asked. "Absolutely sure." It was 15 years of listening to those conversations. Lisa Wallace knew exactly where the money she was receiving came from. When Victoria finished her testimony and returned to her seat, Lily stood up from her chair and ran to hug her. "You were very brave, Mommy," she whispered. Lisa's lawyer tried to discredit Victoria's testimony, arguing that 15 years of captivity could have affected her memory and perception of reality. But his strategy had the opposite effect. It only emphasized the cruelty of what had been done to her. It was then that something unexpected happened. Mike, the former ranch worker, asked permission to speak as a witness. "Your Honor," he said firmly, "I worked for Frank for 15 years. And I can confirm that Mrs. Lisa visited the ranch regularly. She knew there were workers in poor conditions. She knew there were people locked up there. Once I heard her ask Frank about the woman upstairs, and he replied that it was part of the family business." Mike's testimony was devastating for Lisa's defense. Other workers stood up to confirm that she had visited the ranch several times over the years and always seemed aware of the questionable nature of Frank's operations. Lisa, realizing her position was becoming untenable, finally asked to speak. "Your Honor," she said in a trembling voice, I knew my cousin wasn't a completely honest person, but I never imagined he was capable of such terrible things." "Did you receive money from him regularly?" the judge asked. "Yes, I did, but he said it was from the peach business." "And you never questioned why he paid you such generous amounts without you working for it?" Lisa remained silent for a long moment. I didn't want to know the details. It was convenient for me not to ask." The admission was devastating. She had confessed that she consciously chose not to investigate the source of the money she received because it was convenient for her. The judge deliberated for 2 hours. When he returned to the courtroom, his expression was serious but determined. "After reviewing all the evidence presented," he began, "it is clear that the properties in question were obtained through heinous crimes. It is also clear that the applicant Lisa Wallace had knowledge, even if not detailed, of the illicit nature of the activities that generated the money she received." He paused, looking directly at Victoria. "Therefore, this court rules that all properties that belong to the Peterson family be immediately returned to Mrs. Victoria Harrison, the rightful heir. Furthermore, Lisa Wallace must repay all amounts received from Frank Wallace over the last 15 years, with interest and inflation adjustments." The courtroom erupted in applause. Victoria collapsed in tears of relief, embraced by David and Lily. 15 years of suffering had finally resulted in complete justice. Lisa left the courtroom visibly distraught, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Her plan to benefit from her cousin's crimes had not only failed, but would result in her financial ruin. "We won, Mommy!" Lily shouted, jumping into Victoria's arms. "Now we can help all the workers!" Outside the courthouse, the community that had supported the family celebrated. Sarah approached Victoria with tears in her eyes. "You did it," she said. "You got justice not only for your family, but for all the people Frank harmed." That night, in the security of their home, the Harrison family celebrated more than a legal victory. They had proven that love, perseverance, and unity could overcome even the cruelest injustices. "What are we going to do with the land now?" David asked. Victoria looked at Lily, who was quietly drawing on the living room rug. "We're going to do exactly what our daughter suggested. We're going to turn a place of suffering into a place of hope. The agricultural cooperative that would be born from those lands would be more than an economic project. It would be a symbol that even from the greatest darkness, light can be born, and that families can be stronger than any adversity." 1 year after the court victory, Frank's former ranch had transformed into something no one could have imagined. The Clara Jones Agricultural Cooperative, named in honor of the grandmother who cared for Lily during the toughest times, was now a symbol of renewal and hope for the entire region. On that sunny April morning, Lily ran through the green fields where workers once suffered under the scorching sun. At 5 years old, she had grown up strong and confident, but maintained the sensitivity and wisdom that had developed during her difficult early years. Her laughter echoed across the fields as she chased butterflies among the rows of peaches that were now cultivated by families who received fair wages and decent working conditions. "Lily, be careful not to step on the seedlings," shouted Victoria, who was overseeing the planting of a new area of the cooperative. She had become the project's general coordinator, using her experience of suffering to create something truly transformative. Victoria's transformation in recent months had been impressive. The work at the cooperative gave her purpose and energy. She still had occasional episodes of anxiety, especially when visiting the parts of the property where she had been imprisoned. But now, those moments were rare and manageable. Ms. Victoria, Mike called out, approaching with a wide smile on his face. He had become the cooperative's field supervisor and, for the first time in decades, seemed genuinely happy. "This semester's harvest is going to be the best we've ever had. The buyers from Atlanta are impressed with the quality of our peaches." David appeared in the field shortly after, coming from the administrative office that had been built where Frank's house once stood. They had demolished the original building, a place of so many bad memories, and erected a modern community center that served as the cooperative's office, agricultural school, and gathering place. "How are the numbers?" Victoria asked, wiping the dirt from her hands. "Excellent. The cooperative is already self-sustaining and generating profit for all participating families. We managed to employ 40 families in the region, all with proper contracts, decent wages and profit sharing." Lily ran up to her parents, holding a yellow butterfly that had landed on her hand. "Look, she's not afraid of me." "That's because you have a kind heart," Victoria said, caressing her daughter's hair. "Animals sense that." The house where the family lived had become a meeting point for the entire cooperative community. Every Friday, families gathered in the backyard for a community lunch where the children played together while the adults discussed the project's progress and shared their stories of overcoming adversity. "Aunt Victoria," said Amy, one of the cooperative's newest workers, "my son wants to know if he can join the school choir." Victoria had created a children's choir that performed at the cooperative's festivities. It was a way to give the community's children opportunities she herself had never had. Of course he can. Lily can teach him the songs. Lily had become an unofficial little teacher, teaching other children to sing, to draw songbirds, and, most importantly, not to be afraid to dream of a better future. Sarah showed up in the late afternoon, as she did every weekend since the cooperative was established. She'd become not only the project's official social worker, but also a close friend of the family. "How was the week?" she asked, accepting the coffee David offered her. "We received an interesting proposal," David said. "An international sustainable development organization wants to use our cooperative as a model for other projects in Latin America." "That's incredible," Sarah exclaimed. "You managed to create something that goes beyond your own recovery." Victoria smiled, watching Lily play with other children in the yard. "Sometimes I still can't believe all this came out of that tragedy. That from so much suffering, something so beautiful was born. Grandma Clara always said that God turns all pain into love when we let him," Lily said, appearing beside them as if she had overheard the conversation. Despite being very young when her grandmother died, she often remembered and repeated the words of wisdom she had heard. That night, after Sarah left and Lily fell asleep, David and Victoria sat on the porch, watching the cooperative's lights twinkling in the darkness. Each light represented a family that had found dignity and hope after years of exploitation. "Do you regret anything?" David asked, holding his wife's hand. Victoria thought for a moment. "I regret not being braver before, not reporting Frank when I started to suspect his dirty dealings. Maybe I could have prevented other families from suffering. You were young and alone against a powerful man. You did what you could at the time. And you? Do you regret anything?" "I regret taking so long to find you. All the signs I missed, all the leads I didn't follow properly." Lily appeared at the door, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Why are you awake?" "Just talking, Princess," David said, picking her up. "Do you want to stay with us for a little while?" Lily snuggled up between her parents, looking at the stars. "Daddy, Mommy, do you think Grandma Clara is proud of us?" "I'm sure she is," Victoria replied, kissing her daughter's forehead. "She always wanted you to grow up in a happy family." "And do you think the bad man learned it was wrong to hurt people?" It was a difficult question. Frank had died in prison 6 months earlier, a victim of health complications aggravated by the stress of incarceration. Lisa had declared bankruptcy and left the region after paying the compensation ordered by the court. "Sometimes people just can't learn, darling," David said carefully. But the important thing is that we learn to turn bad things into good things. Like the cooperative, Lily said, nodding wisely. The ranch was bad before, but now it's good. 3 months later, the cooperative received a visit that would once again change the course of their lives. Dr. Charles Grant, a representative of the United Nations Development Program, arrived with a team of documentarians to record the project. In 30 years working with rural development, I've never seen such a complete transformation, he told Victoria during the interview. You managed to create a model that combines social justice, economic sustainability, and community healing. It wasn't just us, Victoria replied. It was the whole community. Every family that decided to believe that a fresh start was possible. The documentation of the project resulted in an invitation for Victoria to present the cooperative's experience at an international conference on sustainable development in Washington, D.C. It was an opportunity to inspire similar projects in other regions of the country. Are you going to accept? David asked when they received the invitation. We're going to accept, Victoria corrected. If we're going to tell our story, I want it to be our family telling it together. And so it was that on a December morning, Victoria took the stage in a packed auditorium in Washington, D.C., with David and Lily by her side to tell how a family destroyed by greed and violence had managed to rebuild and transform their pain into hope for hundreds of other people. Our story is not about revenge, Victoria told an attentive audience. It's about transformation. It's about how love can be stronger than hatred, how community can be stronger than oppression, and how even children can be teachers of hope. Lily, who had insisted on participating in the presentation, approached the microphone with the natural ease of a child accustomed to being heard and valued. I wanted to say something, she said in her clear voice. When I was little and lived alone, I thought I would never have a family. But I found out that family isn't just about who you're born to. Family is about who chooses to stay together. And now I have a very big family. Daddy, Mommy, Uncle Mike, Aunt Sarah, all the people at the cooperative, and even the songbirds in our backyard. The auditorium laughed emotionally, and Lily continued, If you know a child who is sad or an adult who has lost hope, you can tell them that you can always start over. There are always good people in the world ready to help. When the presentation ended, the family received a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. They were not just applauding a successful project, but a living demonstration that human resilience can overcome any adversity. On the flight back to Richmond, Lily looked out the airplane window, observing the clouds. Daddy, from up there, can I see our house? You can't see it exactly, but you can see the region where it is, David replied. I want to see it to blow a kiss to our home, she said, pressing her face against the window. 2 years later, on a radiant, sunny morning, the family gathered at the Harmony Creek Cemetery for a special visit. They had finally managed to locate and transfer the remains of Victoria's family to a dignified memorial, where they also placed a symbolic headstone for Clara Jones. Grandma Clara, Lily said, placing flowers on the grave. Look how much our family has grown. Now there are over 200 of us at the cooperative, and all of them have good homes, food every day, and decent work. Victoria knelt beside her daughter, delicately touching the headstone. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for taking care of our girl when I couldn't. Thank you for teaching her that there is always hope. David put his hand on his wife's shoulder. They would be proud of who you've become. Who we've become, Victoria corrected. This story is ours. All three of us. When they left the cemetery, Lily held both parents' hands and said, Now they can rest in peace because they know we are happy. That afternoon, at the cooperative, the agricultural school that had been Victoria's dream since the project's inception was inaugurated. Young people from all over the region could now learn sustainable farming techniques, rural administration, and cooperativism. "This school will train a new generation," Sarah said during the ceremony. "A generation that grew up seeing that it's possible to build prosperity without exploiting anyone." Lily, now 7, was chosen to cut the inauguration ribbon. When the ceremony ended, she ran through the corridors of the new school, her footsteps echoing like music through the spaces that would soon be filled with young students. "Mommy," she said, returning to where her parents were, "one day I want to study here too. I want to learn to take care of the land the way you take care of people." Victoria hugged her daughter, her heart overflowing with pride and gratitude. She had started this journey as a desperate victim, having lost everything she loved. Now she was a mother, wife, community leader, and inspiration to hundreds of people. "You can be anything you want, my dear," she said. "You can dream of any future. Because now we know that all dreams are possible when there is love to sustain them." In that twilight, as the sun set over the cooperative's fields, the Harrison family walked hand in hand along the paths that had once known only suffering. Now, those same paths echoed with children's laughter, the songs of happy workers, and the sound of machines producing shared prosperity. The story had begun with a 4-year-old girl looking for food in the trash and witnessing an injustice. It ended with a family that had transformed their pain into strength, their separation into unity, and their tragedy into hope for an entire community. And every night, before falling asleep, Lily still sang the songbird song her mother had taught her, and that her grandmother Clara had preserved during the darkest years. It was a melody of freedom, of love, and the certainty that even in the most desperate situations, there is always a way to fly toward the light. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story by giving it a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.